The success of the studio is largely due to the instructors that we have, but being able to, extract from everybody's talent and ability to contribute and then use that in a more structured way so that newer instructors, again, it's more than just a job. It's more than just teaching Pilates. They're coming in, they're learning, they're seeing what other instructors are doing. Like, I have a studio manager, but she's primarily remote. So she comes into the studio maybe twice a month. So the instructors are very involved in management of the actual space and of their clients. So there's a large amount of trust and independence that's part of the studio. And so you have to respect that and pay accordingly and manage accordingly.
Pilates business owners, welcome to the Pilates Business Podcast, brought to you by the people who own, operate and instruct in a successful clinical Pilates studio in Australia. Our mission is to help you to discover Pilates business assets to build your clinical Pilates business success. And now, here is your host, David Gunther.
Welcome back to the Pilates Business Podcast. Today we're wrapping up our three-part conversation with professional Pilates instructor Carla Ricalis. Carla owns the Toronto-based Pilates Studio 3. In this final episode with Carla, we dive into how the intentional combination of systems and culture can transform your Pilates studio, helping you retain valued instructors, create trust, and ultimately give your team more freedom to thrive. Carla shares her extensive experience building a Pilates studio business where systems help to unlock creativity rather than restrict it. Together we explore the lessons learned from past failures, the power of accountability, and strategies that have led to long-term studio success. So let's dive in.
Let's start with number A on my list of A to F, failures, attracting and retaining top quality instructors, failures. So have you got any stories that you could share with us about a failure people like to hear about?
I don't have anything.
Can I start? I'll start with a...
Yeah, you start. Go ahead. Yeah.
So in COVID, we'd been really helping some instructors build up who were student instructors who'd come through. And we had some excellent instructors and coming into COVID, and they were just doing that transition of being on 5 days a week in a day job to 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week. And then COVID hit and there's lockdowns and shutdowns and all of that. And I really do remember one instructor asking me, David, what's going to happen? Because I'd been saying, there's always work in play. Well, there's going to be plenty of work. And because we need instructors all the time, and that honestly was what we have and what we have now. However, with COVID and with the pandemic and lockdowns, I had to be honest and say, I don't know. We don't know where this is going. We've never seen this before. And that instructor pretty much threw up their hands and went, I've got to go. I've got to leave the industry, at least for the moment. I think they came back to the industry later, but not with us, unfortunately. And that was heartbreaking for her, heartbreaking for me, because that journey of a potential instructor who could be fantastic on the team, who was on the team, and then we've lost that instructor because I was honest. In my view, maybe not supportive enough in her view,
Well, I would just have to say, I don't think that's not being supportive. I think it was just like nobody knew what was going on, trying to manage a business.
Our responsibility was, to try to survive as a business, for us as our income, for the business owners, for the clients and the instructors who had work. And the Australian government was actually terrific in terms of a lot of support. You could have done with more. What we did get was good and did help us to survive. But it was a different sort of a challenge, that one. And unfortunately, we failed with being able to, there's so many stepping stones along the journey to becoming a qualified, useful instructor for our brand of Pilates.
Yeah, when I look at failure like an opportunity to learn, not so much a failure, but, just for me, so one related to COVID, which again is not so much a failure, but it's just like the studio space, and when we're just getting back to now like this non sort of sequestered sort of sections in the studio, where in COVID we very much had almost like workstations. So, people were spread out and there was certain distance between them. And when I did that back in, I guess, 2022, and we had so many closures like during, and I sold several reformers, which not for the financial aspect of it, but just more, let's just get them out of the space because we're going to spread out and we'll just sort of cross that bridge of getting more reformers in the space when we get back at it. And I've always sort of regretted that just because I ended up buying reformers, of course, but again, it was it was a greater expense after COVID, like everything else in the world, So not so much now, but just that sort of rash decision making.
Sometimes the best decision is to do nothing.
Right. And I should have just left it, because the dynamic with the instructors, and this has shifted, like honestly, I have a very, very excellent team, a very positive team of instructors. They all work well together. They all are self-guided, self-motivating. They communicate well with each other. But I know that just even of myself being in the space and working in the space, you get used to having this whole little section, these private little Pilates studios, as do your clients. Well, this is it, right? And so this is where I've had to sort of like, it's been a little bit of like they all understand, they all know, but now it's like we need to get more people working simultaneously in the space in order to keep the space, so that sort of rash decision of selling equipment at the time, I didn't think that through as well as I probably could have.
I've got another story about where we failed and taking my responsibility in that process on my shoulders there and these were, I guess they were particularly young student instructors. Mm-hmm. And my mistake was to want it more than the student instructor really wanted it, and therefore put more in, so contributing to the cost of their course. In one case, I think we paid for a course, and because we believed in them more than they believed in themselves or us, obviously, and they weren't taking on the responsibility. So we were taking on more responsibility, and that was a mistake.
Yeah. I have in the past considered that, but I've more or less like taken instructors who haven't fully completed their training. So let's say they've done mat and reformer, they're certified, they've done the exam, but their rate is going to reflect that. And there is a commitment for them to do the Cadillac, the chair, the barrels, the injuries and special populations course that Marathon puts out. And there's an expectation to that. And I have experienced that, very strict with like, this need to be completed or you need to be enrolled in this course at such a time. Because if it's an open-ended, get it done whenever you want to get it done, it ends up that I've had a couple of instructors who have never gotten it done. And consequently, their commitment to being in the profession was not what I thought it was going to be. And they ended up leaving. And so I've learned that when I'm hiring instructors, if they haven't fully done a certification and they're in the midst, that I need very concrete deadlines. Otherwise, just keeping it open-ended is not good for anyone.
A concrete deadline that Claire always encourages student instructors with is the exam, the final exam, and setting that date and making it a hard date, that like, this is it, this is the time when you're going to do the exam. If you don't do the exam, then you've failed as well. But
it's true. It's true. So I've sort of learned that way, because being in such a need for instructors, you sort of compromise what, your expectations, right?
There's always that temptation, isn't it? Yeah, because you want them.
Especially if they're good, right? Especially if they're strong and they have potential and you see that.
Yeah.
And it's, well, okay, let's start you and then we'll, so.
One of the advantages that we have with the semi-privates, coming back briefly to that, is that it really helps with team teaching. So it helps with bringing on a newer instructor who, if we've got 3 people in a semi-private, or say 4 people, and say we've got this student instructor who Claire can supervise, and they're almost qualified, they might be about to do the exam, right. They've got that hard date set up in a month or two's time, and they're pretty much ready, and they probably could do it on their own, but it's better to be supervised. They can take on the responsibility and be paid to look after
Right.
one of the people. So there'd be
Right.
5 in the team taught semi-private instead of 4 by one instructor. There's one instructor and one student instructor
Yeah.
who's pretty much almost qualified. And that student instructor is being supervised by the lead instructor. And then when they're ready, they can have 2 people. And
Right.
then when they're ready, perhaps when they're qualified, at that point, when they've successfully completed the exam, maybe 3 people. And they're
Yeah.
still getting that
And
not
that's a
just
smart way.
supervision, but feedback, and the confidence
Yeah.
builds gradually rather than having to go from down here
Right.
to jump off the top tower into
Yeah.
the civic pool as we
Yeah,
used to do as
yeah.
kids. So it's a long way
Yeah.
down.
I think for us, with our studio being well established, there's a number of instructors. I've been teaching for close to 30 years, but I have instructors who have been teaching for 20 years and 25 years. So for us, there's that opportunity for a little bit of, it's not structured mentoring, but we do ask new instructors who come in that they observe and watch instructors with their clients, provided the clients are comfortable with them doing that. But those new instructors to be teaching at the same level that the instructors are, it's just not going to
No.
happen, you know?
No.
And so only up until, gosh, not very long ago, but in fact, I want to say, I think after COVID, I had everybody at the same price package. So
Yeah.
myself, the new instructor, everybody had the same rates. You know, and you learn these things as you sort of continue. And so now what I have is a tiered packaging, and that just gives everybody breathing room a little bit, because if you're going to have somebody who has 20 plus years of experience, well, then the rates you pay
Yeah.
are reflective of that compared to somebody who just got certified 6 months ago.
We have a similar process with our private sessions for that initial onboarding of clients into their program where they do the 2 privates. Also in that we pay bonuses for instructors that get more than the 2 in a semi-private.
Yeah.
So they get a bonus at 3 and they get a bonus at 4. And very occasionally, because our maximum is 4, but very occasionally there's 5, but they get bonuses for those extra people. So it sort of is self-selecting for both the instructors. If they work a bit harder, but they get paid significantly more, particularly if they have 4 in the session.
Yeah.
And for the clients, if they want that instructor, then they're self-selecting too into busier sessions because they want that instructor's popular, that instructor gets paid more because there's more people in their session.
Right, there's more demand.
So that self-selection is another benefit that I thought,
that's a great part of that model. Similar with our group class series to incentivize instructors and clients. I mean, the group class series, it's the same rate across in terms of what a client's paying per class, per series. But for the instructors, there's an incentive based on the number of people who sign up. So if it's full, then you're making this amount. But if it's not full, you're making this amount. And the idea is that I'm looking at it from the percentages I set have been set based on, our space is quite small for our group reformer classes. So there's 4 reformers, but if you only get 3 people in your group class, that 4th reformer basically remains unused because to put a private there, I can't. So it's a cost to me. So that's going to be reflected in their pay. So it works in their favor to sort of, for lack of a better word, hustle to get a 4th person in there because you're going to get a larger piece of the action in terms of what they're getting paid for the group class.
And we do the same with our group classes, which are mat classes, which are, again, pretty small. They might be from about 3 or 4 people up to 10 because we have a hybrid model where there could only be ever 6 in the studio because it's only a certain size, but there could be another 6 online. So there could be a dozen people, and there's bonuses for the instructor for having more than a certain number in that hybrid model. And again, that works well for the studio, for the clients, and for the instructors as well.
Help the team at the Pilates Business Podcast keep improving and delivering this important information. Follow the show on your favourite podcast platform and recommend it to other clinical Pilates business owners.
Let's talk more about the successes and what are the steps along the way with helping a student instructor who's doing the course onto that ability to actually join your team as a useful instructor there, contributing to the team, enjoying it themselves and helping clients, obviously.
Yeah, I've found that the more systems in place, and this is something that, as we've grown, like I have a studio manager, so I've been able to really sort of define, the role as a manager or studio coordinator. And my role is director of the studio. And so when instructors come and apply to the studio to work with us, they're seeing the added value of the education and the guidance that they're going to get along the way from myself and from other instructors in the studio. So who I regularly, especially my more experienced ones, I will contract them to create a workshop for an in-house workshop for studio instructors. So if I know they have a specific interest that is applicable or informs how they teach Pilates, I'll ask them to do maybe a 2 or 3 hour workshop. So it's not always me. So they're sort of, again, the instructors are seeing the value that's in the studio. I think that the success of the studio is largely due to the instructors that we have, but being able to, I guess, like extract from everybody's talent and ability to contribute and then use that in a more structured way so that newer instructors, again, it's more than just a job. It's more than just teaching Pilates. They're coming in, they're learning, they're seeing what other instructors are doing. Like I have a studio manager, but she's primarily remote. So she comes into the studio maybe twice a month. So the instructors are very involved in management of the actual space and of their clients. We use our software as MBO, and they have just as much access as the manager does. Maybe not as much, just in terms of revenue and reports and stuff like that, but they're able to go in and manage their schedule, and not that they do, but access everybody else's schedule as well. So there's a large amount of trust and independence that's part of the studio. I've worked at a number of different studios, but it's always like these are all adults. They're all adults trying to make a living. And so you have to respect that and pay accordingly and manage accordingly. But I think one of the pitfalls that I've seen in studios is when they try to over control, or they're sort of working with children it's sort of that mentality because they're teaching. So it's something that I just try to let them have their independence and try not to micromanage everything.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. What I'm hearing there is that you're allowing your instructors to take on an appropriate level of responsibility, and your expectation is that they will fulfill that level of responsibility very well, and that even go a bit further, perhaps take on a bit more responsibility. For example, we've got an excellent instructor who was a client of ours for many years before she then became a student instructor, and now she's gotten so good at being an instructor. She's fantastic, and she's taking on the role as a mentor in the course with Polestar that's hosted in our studio.
Shout out to Pilates instructors, and a big shout out to all our instructors, past and present, who have created a wonderful Pilates culture at Pilates Can Studios in Canberra, Australia. There are about a dozen of us currently, including some that make our lives easier by filling in here and there when other regulars are on holidays or unable to instruct for some other reason. Thanks to you all. You are very special people, and we know that because our clients regularly tell us exactly that.
It's just so satisfying for us to see instructors taking on that responsibility. And I think for good instructors, that is something that we're looking for. Okay, I would not necessarily to be overconfident and I can do everything, which you sometimes get, but I would like to take on that level of responsibility and then build from that to the next level and be confident with those levels, because we've got enough responsibility, haven't we, as studio owners, and having to instruct our own clients and do all of the different things that we do with the business and with clients. The other thing that you mentioned there early on, which I think we maybe should dive a bit deeper on, and you mentioned it again a little bit later, is system. So you use a scheduling management system, but you have other systems in and around that as well. And I think that's probably underestimated by new instructors. It's a little bit hard to communicate to them about how good that is to be in a studio that has that sort of systematic approach, systems in place, because what it means is it doesn't look like anything's really happening, because everything just happens, bang, because that's the way you've done it. And if you're like us, which I assume you probably are, nothing's ever perfect. You're always looking for how do we continuously improve. But also we do it this way because if we do it a different way, we found it just doesn't work that well. So this is why we have these simple processes. Would you like to speak to that some more?
Well, I think that's been trial and error. And I think like when the studio first opened, and like I've put this on my LinkedIn, is I've been everything from like the cleaner to the bookkeeper to the manager to, everything. So then as you start to get busier, you start to get a little more established. When I think of a system, I think of the bookkeeper, like that is a system and there's a system in place. She uses QuickBooks and that is something that's very sort of structured and organized. So everybody gets their tax forms at the end of the year and that type of thing. There's a certain expectation of how their invoices should look, not for aesthetics, but more just so that the information that we need to put into the system that the bookkeeper uses is there, because it's all about efficiency on that level. So when we're looking at sort of the behind the scenes, same with the cleanliness in the studio, there's just certain things that have to be in place in order for the experience for the clients and what they're paying is surpassed, right? So the bathroom, the floors, the front door, the mirrors, the window, all this sort of stuff. But then the systems for the instructors, as I mentioned, they're a great team of instructors, which is good because if somebody new comes in and they're not quite familiar with that, and most instructors working, if they're new and they're working at several different studios just to sort of establish themselves, it's a very distinct experience working at our studio because there is communication systems, chat groups on given days with given instructors. If there's 7 instructors in there, they need to communicate. I need to be on the Cadillac at noon because my client can't use a reformer, these type of things. I'm trying to think, that's a system or a system to our clients with our newsletters and communicating like what we're doing and our group class schedule and a little sort of information about what we've been up to or what's changing in the studio or what's new in the studio and stuff. So all these sort of things have become systems just in terms of implementing them into the running of the studio. So we don't just put out a newsletter when we feel like it. We plan these quarterly newsletters. I have the Pilates Resource Catalog, which is instructor focused, but that recently merged into our studio newsletter to be called Elevate. And that gives the best of both worlds because it allows us to show our clients what we're working on and where we are in the industry in terms of the type of studio that we're striving to be, but then also show instructors out in the world the type of studio that we're striving to be. It's all part of that sort of cohesiveness of running a studio.
That's all excellent. And 2 big points I take out of that too. What you're creating there with your continuous improvement and integrating your clients' access to that resource of repertoire is that you're building that closer link between the best source of instructors that you'll find in the community, which is your own clientele, coming through, doing that and becoming more like instructors, and then you giving them the confidence to perhaps take that next step. And still, you've got all the systems there, which is really important. And again, I'd reiterate the point. I don't think that instructors, and particularly new instructors, and particularly younger new instructors necessarily might appreciate how much, and you probably don't appreciate actually how much work and how many systems you do actually have. If you did an audit of all your systems, we got this,
right, of everything. When I was saying that, I was thinking like, oh my God, I could list them all off. And we really do. And sometimes I worry, like I just said earlier, I don't like to micromanage. I've had instructors who have worked at our studio and they've relocated to another city for whatever reasons. And they've written and said, I can't even tell you the type of studio, it's not clean. Nobody's putting the equipment away. the scheduling is a nightmare, it's overbooked, or nobody's closing the studio, just stuff. And I think just the type of person I am anyways, I prioritize those things. I just think that's just my personality to be a little bit more focused on those things. But at the end of the day, we're working with people and we're teaching people about their bodies, and we're getting them connected into movement patterns that perhaps they never thought they could do. And so if the person teaching that is in a space, and the space that they're teaching it in is cohesive to that and contributes to that, it's just going to be a better experience overall. If you're in a dirty space, then even if everybody says it's fine or, it doesn't matter to me, I think it still contributes to a little bit of less than a great workout. If the instructor is in a disorganized environment, that sort of stress of like, well, what can I get? And who else is going to be in here? Am I going to be able to get on the reformer? And it really sort of breeds this kind of
unnecessary tension.
And everybody's just looking out for themselves as opposed to everybody's kind of contributing to the overall experience.
Makes it competitive rather than cooperative.
Yeah. As time goes on, and I do think they have a bigger value beyond just organizing. Like they do contribute to the overall client experience and instructor experience of working there.
As a Pilates business owner, you know that the right business assets and processes are the defining factors in your business success and the quality of your life. In each episode, successful Pilates business owner David Gunther will unpack proven, practical, world-class assets and processes that you can use to survive and thrive in your own Pilates business. If you're ready to take your business to the next level, then stay tuned. And if you'd like to get there quicker and with less experimentation, go to www.pilatesbusiness.com.au.
And you also touched on something that I think is very important too, the willingness to allow the freedom with your instructors to have creativity and deal with issues as they come along. Certainly to be able to ask questions of you or other senior instructors when necessary, but to be able to take on that role of being that freedom as well, because they're not in there working with you in a Pilates studio to be an office worker or to be an automaton. They're a production line. They're there because they want to connect with people and help people, and they want to bring what they have and their creativity to it. So being able to encourage that, having a clean, systemized approach and space and all business running efficiently is terrific, as long as it can also allow that creativity and responsibility.
Well, that's what we're striving for. But yes.
Yeah, well, we've had a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, no, it's been good.
And really pleased to have been able to connect with you, Carla, about this.
No, I wanted to say thank you. I mean, I think it's great what you're doing with this, because I think further to our point about different Pilates approaches or different Pilates instructors with different backgrounds, it's kind of like we're all these spokes in the wheel, and you sort of, to a certain extent, your podcast is the hub of it a bit, just bringing people together to talk about these universal things. I don't think there's any small Pilates studio in the world that isn't impacted by this shift in the industry. And so it's great to be able to hear these different discussions. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Carla, because I'd definitely like to have you on again for, other, if you're
my pleasure,
at some stage, so that, again, the industry benefits and we produce something out there that's useful to people.
That wraps up our conversation with professional Pilates instructor Carla Ricalis. Carla's insights into systems, trust, and team culture highlight what's possible when you empower instructors instead of micromanaging them. It's a reminder that structure doesn't restrict, it actually creates the freedom that helps instructors, clients, and studios thrive. If you've enjoyed this series, make sure to subscribe to the Pilates Business Podcast, leave us a review, and share your favourite episode with other studio owners who'll benefit from these conversations. And remember, if you're ready to build best practice business development and marketing assets for your Pilates studio, head to www.pilatesbusiness.com.au. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
You have been listening to the Pilates Business Podcast with David Gunther. If you are enjoying the show, let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. For more information, or if you have any Pilates business questions, visit www.pilatesbusiness.com.au.